Yeah. And so you went in there with a lot of idealism. You had goals. You wanted to learn new things when you went to work there. So when you got there as a Senate aide, when did things kind of begin to maybe not feel as idealistic or as positive while you were there?
Well, almost right away, unfortunately. And I want to contrast it a little bit to Leon Panetta's office. Leon Panetta's office was very professional. Politically, I may not agree with everything he does, but he was very serious minded and he worked very hard, and the office was very structured. It was just like what you would expect, a normal, like you're trying to do things for your constituents. And it was a normal working environment. Biden's office was a shock. It wasn't that way at all. It was a very top down kind of, people were treated not very well, lower staff. I mean, for an example, one of my colleagues who had an advanced degree and worked as a legislative aide was telling the senator, advising him how to vote and like giving him information. He was delegated to drive the limo for Beau Biden and his date for the inaugural events. And he had to do that as a volunteer. He wasn't paid for that. And it's not like, and I mean, that they just kind of treated their staff like minions a lot of times, unless they were on the inside track, and then they were given a lot of favor. So it was a very strange environment. Joe Biden did not seem serious to me. He seemed more, he didn't seem intellectually committed to what he was doing, is what I'm trying to say. And I got that right away. The way he would touch me, I thought was unusual, but remember, this is the 90s. What was tolerated then is very different than what happens now. But even then it was unusual. And unusual enough for me to call my mother and say, hey, this happened and this happened. And I kept calling her and she said, she educated me, really, that's not okay. That's sexual harassment. He has power over you and he shouldn't be doing that. Because he would put his hands on my shoulder and go underneath my hair. And he asked for me to serve drinks at an event. I don't know what type, but it was, I thought it was a fundraising, but I don't know. But he liked my legs apparently, and thought I was pretty and wanted me to serve drinks. And I wasn't there for that. I was serious about what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn and I wanted to grow and I wanted to, like I said, I had aspirations of eventually running for office or running an office. I mean, running, like a chief of staff position or running for office myself. I didn't have aspirations of being, dating a senator. I wanted to be one.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And when you kind of started experiencing those uncomfortable things, you said you told your mother and you kind of knew that it was weird. Did you notice that he would kind of treat a lot of women like that? Was it like mostly you? What was kind of, how did you like observe him?
What I noticed about Joe Biden is he treats people like objects. It's like they're in his world. And I felt definitely like I did not feel important. I didn't feel like he was giving me special attention. I felt like I was just there, an object, like for his amusement, pleasure, whatever it was at that particular moment. He's not I know people keep saying how warm and engaging he is. That is not my experience of him. My experience of him is and he also had a very bad temper. So, and we all saw that in staff. And I think in a congressional hearing, if some of those staff members were called, they would have to tell the truth about the real atmosphere of that office.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some of the videos of, him with the Clarence Thomas hearing or other things. And so he definitely does have more of that dark side that isn't just the friendly Joe. So when you were there, how long were you working there?
9 months, approximately.
9 months.
9
okay.
Months, technically, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how did that come to an end?
Well, it was after I had filed the sexual harassment with the Senate, and they called it back then the counseling office. They didn't really have a proper name. They didn't really address sexual harassment back then in a protocol way, the way they do now. Everything has changed like 2 or 3 times since that year. But I was given basically an intake form, and they were going to like mediate a counseling session or something. But I filled out the form, and that's what I recall. And it was filed, and then no one ever followed up. When they followed up, I wanted to talk about the sexual assault because this was after it. It was right after that period of time is when my duties were stripped. I wasn't allowed to supervise the interns. I was put in an office space where I was told that even if I went to the restroom, I had to call and tell my supervisor where I was going and what I was doing and for how long. And it was very, and they basically said, your job is to look for another job. You're not a good fit. So I was basically forced to resign. And that was coming from the chief of staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And when you reported it, did you report like what he did, or is it more kind of like, here's a sexual harassment claim, or kind of how did that work? What did you tell them at the time that they sort of swept under the rug?
I didn't tell them anything. It was an intake form. So it was literally just a written form. I gave probably basic sentences and in hopes that they would call back. And they also, of course, I was supposed to put down another person's, so I had a cooperating witness and put down her phone number. And she was never called. And I never heard anything after. So nothing.
Wow.
Nothing came of it. My understanding is that it should be sealed in the University of Delaware files if it's there. Although Joe Biden has made it clear that those files are not in the public interest and will not be released.
Wow. Well, it's good that you're speaking up about it because then people can hear from you directly. How did your experience with that sexual harassment affect you throughout life after that work experience?
It definitely impacted me. I mean, I went to the next job that I had. I couldn't get a job on the Hill. I had a baby the next in 1994. My daughter Michaela was born, and I got a job with State Senator Jack O'Connell. And Lorraine Sanchez has already gone on the record and talked about this, but I immediately was really tense. And she was like, look, I told her about, some of what I experienced. And she said, that doesn't happen in this office. And it didn't. I didn't have any of those negative experiences. She said, we don't. So yeah, it definitely, I became very cautious, defensive, if you will. It impacted me immensely because it impacted my self-esteem. I think, some of the things he said to me was very devastating at the time, and it resonated throughout my life, particularly the sexual assault. It had a deep impact on my life. It took a long, long time to not be completely frightened to talk about it. So I talked about it to a few friends or close family, but definitely not the media at that time. And I think what really got to me was seeing Lucy Flores torn to pieces, that young politician from Nevada. And when I saw her, media just kind of eviscerating her just because she came forward and said, hey, this wasn't comfortable. She didn't even make that strong of an accusation, but it was creepy, right? He kissed the top of her head and he had his hand. She didn't, she was a politician and she was trying to be serious. And it was at once creepy, but also kind of, I don't know. It's like him asserting his power and control again. And again, people need to understand that with sexual harassment and sexual assault, it's not about sex. It's about power and control. And Joe Biden always, because I think he is and this is my opinion and total based on what I experienced, but I think he has deep insecurities. And so I think he gets in people's spaces. He does those types of things to exert his power, try to be alpha.